All right, now live. Looks like everything's up and running. Oh, I can't hear myself. Put an earpiece in. Give it a few minutes, see if anybody comes aboard. There we go. Check. All right. So there's the microphone I was looking for. I'll tell you what, boys, it's an all-out mess around here. The amount of things you have to buy and keep up with, pretty ridiculous. All right. Background looks good. Frank, what's up, my friend? Appreciate you again heading in here, Frank. I noticed you've been catching some fish, man. On the sunfish, pretty good. I haven't done any. The kids came down to the dock and we did a little fishing for sunfish and bluegill. Clint does a lot of bluegill fishing on the feeder at the pond. This is messed up. Hold on. As usual, I'm ready to go. Hey, welcome aboard, man. Thanks for coming in. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in. Frank says pike and walleye opened yesterday. I should have flipping kicks. Oh, good. The feeder goes back in stock. You talk to the company. That's good, man. I'm going to do a review on that. I meant to get by your place when I was up, but I got to come back up in a week or so. I don't understand what's going on with this. Let's see, what program am I talking about? It has to do with Google AdSense and getting this whole thing hooked up to get paid. It's like copy and paste these things, and I don't know what any of this stuff means. I've got a girl in Atlanta that helps me out, Ian. She's copied in my well, I'll copy her again. I'll make a post for her. She does real good work. Hey, Brendan, what's up, boys? Brendan caught a unit of a freaking bowfin today. Let's see if I can get a picture of that up. If I was on StreamYard, it would be a lot easier. I keep forgetting to go on StreamYard and come on so I can highlight your comments. And let's see, somewhere on here. There we are. Just do it this way. That bowfin. Is that thing like 43 inches long? Should have kept that one. Yeah, man. I would be happy about a big fish like that too. That's awesome. And he didn't have a scale, of course. That's how you guarantee you're going to catch a nice fish that day, right? Just leave your scale in the truck. Don't bring a tape measure. Yeah, you definitely should have kept that one. I don't think the world would have ended on one dead mudfish. Could have been a record, maybe not. I looked up online. The world record was 21 pounds and 41 inches. That fish was 43 inches, but we just don't know what the poundage was. So, but a 43-inch fish, any size, is an absolute hammer. I don't know. I guess in a way, that's an old fish. It's a good that you put him back too. So, yeah, man, I hear you on that. I've kept a few big bass before. Most of the time, I'll put them back myself, but I don't know, man. That's hard to say. It really is. Yeah, somebody would have definitely mounted that one for you, I'm sure. Although with the measurements that you have and the pictures, I'm sure you can get a replica made too, man. That's real. No, replicas look as real as anything else. I think that's all you need is I've never had one made, but I think that's all you need is the length and the girth, and you've got both of those. So We were talking about it. I don't think I haven't had a chance to Google it yet, Brendan, but I don't think there's a standard weight chart for bowfin because I don't think they're considered game fish. I think you can keep as many as you want to. I'm just not sure about that because, well, they might be considered game fish. They're stocked in Florida. Yeah, let us know where you get that replica. That's good information to have. I'll poke around here. There may be some dudes in Florida who know, you know. All right. Welcome aboard, guys. We're just talking about Brendan's 43-inch bowfin that he caught today. That's like reminds me of my friend Mickey. We were fishing in a little tournament with the guys out of Athens. He doesn't. I don't hear from him much anymore. I don't. He graduated and got a job, and now the entire page slips my mind. I'll think of it after the live is over with. But anyway, we were up there at Lake Oconee fishing in a little tournament, and it was last year. And Mickey is slow rolling the spinnerbait. We were on a point, and he pinned. It's actually in my highlights on my Instagram page. He ended up landing a big flathead catfish on blades, and for a second there, we both thought that he had the world record. But after a few minutes of fighting, it was like pretty evident that it was not a bass. It was too strong, and it took him a while to land that one. It was a pretty nice one. I think it pulled it down about 12 pounds, if I remember right. Pretty nice flathead. That is another. I'll bring up another point. Don't move flatheads. Don't move any fish around. We've had a lot of conversations about stocking fish. We can start there. The misinformed. Let's see if we can pull up. Oh, it's probably not on this. Anyway, a client of mine sent in, or a guy I'm consulting with on internet. That's not somebody I'd visit, but he sent in. He had bought a 2 acre pond. Wasn't catching any fish and needed help. You know, he's like, I don't know what's going on. I just bought the place. There's seems to be a really low fish population all the way around. So gave him some pointers. I said, check it for catfish, check it for usually it's channel cats. Somebody had channel cats on a feeder for a long time, didn't harvest any. You get 50 or 100 big channel catfish in a pond, and they can become predatory when they get big. And not only will they compete with your bass, they'll just eat everything up in the pond. I've seen that a few times when like all the catfish are just monsters, like the thing Brendan caught. So he sent some pictures in last week. He pulled 2 flatheads out of there that were bigger than the fish that Brendan had. And it's a 2.5 acre pond, and some idiot threw flathead catfish in there. I don't think they'll spawn in a pond. I think they need flowing water to spawn. I've seen people throw flatheads in ponds before. Actually, I put an electrofishing boat in to now, and the only reason I never saw the flathead, the dude told me he put flatheads in a couple of them in a 1 acre pond, but he didn't tell me before I got there. He told me when I was like halfway through the survey, and the only fish that I had found in the pond were like this big. And it's like as soon as the fish got just out from the bank a tiny little bit, they were gone. Bass, bluegill, there were some green sunfish in there. Um, I can't remember. I don't think we saw any crappie in there, but literally like the 1 acre pond, because I mean he had 2 predators in there that were like 20 and 50 pounds or something he had put in there. And I'm just like, how clueless do you have to be to put a 50-pound predator in a 1 acre pond? Do you keep a lion in your house and then wonder what happened to the dogs and cats? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me how disconnected from reality these dudes are. how can you possibly think that a pond can support? I mean, a pond that size can't even support largemouth bass. You have to harvest them out. You know, the smaller the pond, the more harvest you're going to have because the bass will overrun you and stunt quickly. And Frank says they got flatheads moving into the river. Yeah. Yeah, well, they will, Frank. You can forget about it. That's the part that these dudes don't understand. I've watched it with spotted bass. I've watched it with flatheads. I've watched it with all kinds of invasive fish. Snakeheads are next. Watch that. Look at the zebra mussels. Those aren't even fish, and look what they're doing. You know, um, you get a massive. It's biomass, right? You've got a massive amount of things alive in the water. Hey, there's yen right there. Let's see what she's talking about. Okay, she's going to check out the whole Amazon debacle. Who knows? It's like, oh yeah, you're going to get paid, but you have to first become a computer programmer, and no, you know, they might as well write all the instructions in Chinese to me. It would make as much sense. Anyway, back to the point. Um, like one of my posts I posted the other day was copied to. I did a podcast for Rex Moncrief, the Outdoor News, and he copied one of my posts. So this dude comes in and he's, you know, it's the same old song and dance with these guys. It's like, well, why don't you explain to me why the DNR can stock fish, but we can't stock fish? Kind of a line of nonsense. And I'm like, well, because the DNR has, you know, you have a master's degree in fishery, you have years of studying the environment and how these fish interact with one another. Plus, I'm talking about fish from a private pond that we harvested. He's freaking out about that. There is no state law there. I am the rule maker there. That's my job to tell you what to put in and what to take out and how to manage it properly. Dude's saying I should have my fishing license revoked. And I'm like, you know what? Take it. Have the game warden come over here and take my fishing license. I don't even like fishing in trash water, public lakes. Okay. You guys don't even know what good lakes look like. Don't come on here and talking crap to me. You ever caught 75, 8 pound plus fish in a season? You know, I have in a good lake, in a good pond. You know, you don't even know what you're talking about, like even remotely close. And it's obvious because you're coming up talking crap to me like that. Anyway, dude is like, I'm telling you, man, it's a joke. It's like, am I even talking to an adult person right now? You know, seriously, you think that you can just move fish around? I was like, okay, first of all, are you talking about moving fish from a man-made reservoir or a man-made pond into a river? Because you those fish in man-made places were stocked biologists. They did not evolve there, and taking them and putting them into a river where the fish did evolve there is completely screwing up the gene pool. Not to mention screwing up the balance. Like you have no concept. It only takes a few bass to completely destroy the balance of a fishery. So if you're just throwing a few big fish into a pond, you're messing it up like big time. Like you don't even understand how bad you're messing it up. Plus, like for years, I had like 2,000 acres of bass heavy water around Atlanta, around the southeast area, when I was rolling hard, you know, and I could work for a living really good. And so if in on the offhand chance I came across one of those places that actually needed a few bass and they needed to be advanced, I'd go get them. I'd treat them for the parasites and the disease. I'd transport them. I'd stock them. And I'm talking about like 5, 8, 10 bass per acre, never any more than that. I had one 35-acre lake that had gotten messed up by crappie and gizzard shad. And I figured the gizzard shad, like, so gizzard shad are so bad about stunning out lakes, they actually release a pheromone into the water that ceases reproduction. So they don't keep spawning themselves to absolute death. And since every gizzard shad that I electrofished up, now get this, I put the boat in the lake, right? And like it's got a pedal on it. So if the person falls off the front of the boat, the system disconnects, and before they hit the water, there's no electricity there, so they don't die. There's also a foot pedal on the back of the boat. So if I see anything from the back of the boat going on, I can lift my foot up and kill the system instantly, just like a light switch just kills it. So if a kid runs down, a pet, whatever, because the person in the front doesn't have eyes on everything. I have eyes on everything from the back. So that was my job: run the system and let the net man, run the system. So when we're both on the pedals, the system functions. If one of the others off the pedals, you get the idea. So I get in, I tell my dude on the front, step on your pedal. We're just going to test it. Just make sure the conductivity is good. Make sure, we're getting a current and getting enough. And as soon as I stepped on my pedal in the back, and this is about a 40-acre pond, or at that point, you could probably call it a lake. The entire surface of the lake, everywhere, for as far as you could see around the electrofishing boat, the gizzard shad were just sitting like they do, like 2 inch, not even an inch under the water, like that. For whatever reason, those idiot fish do that. The entire surface of the lake started to waking. Like you could see fish just waking around. I've never seen that before. And I was like, and I let up off the pedal and I was like, oh, wow, what in the hell was that? And then I stepped back on the pedal and they all did it again. And I was like, holy crap. All right, something weird is going on here. Never seen that before. So I said, we're good to go. I clicked it up 2 notches, got about 3-4 amps of current going, and started moving pretty fast and pulsing, and we were trapping. I mean, like 18-inch gizzard shad, all of them, like every one of them, boom, 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 boom. So it had become just dominated by gizzard shad. We hardly found any game fish. We found some bluegill, found some crappie. Crappie looked terrible. Few bass in there that were like 5-pound plus that could choke those shad were units, man. They were just beast fish. But the rest of them, like, I guess the best way to put it is the bass that were lucky enough to survive, be born and survive the crappie predation, and somehow find enough to eat to get up on the gizzard shad look great. But they were few and far between, and the dudes in the neighborhood hardly caught any of those fish. So they were so well fed, and there were so few of them per acre that they were just impossible to catch almost. Every once in a while, somebody jack a 9.5 or something like that. But, with such rarity, no consistency whatsoever, it still tricked everybody in the neighborhood into thinking it was a great place to fish because they caught one decent fish a year, but whatever. Same misinformation. So it was in a HOA type neighborhood. Draining it and restocking it was not an option. They were not having that. Plus, it was a Corps of Engineers managed deal anyway. And I don't know. It's called the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right? So when you go up against them, you're going up against the U.S. Army. And the last time I checked, they don't lose very much. So you're not bossing them around with nothing, The Corps does what the Corps does, and everybody else can eat a booger. So that's the situation I'm in. I've got to make an attempt at trying to readjust the balance of this fishery without a drain and restock. And it's 40 acres. So, and they're not paying me either. They're not going to give me any money to try to help the fish population because it was a weed control job that got me in the place. And this is about the 3rd year in that they finally agreed to even pay for like one fish survey because the fishing was bad. And the board had switched. So somebody who was interested in the fishing got a hold of the checkbook. And that's how I got permission to do any electrofishing at all. Now, what do we do? What's the game plan? We can't drain it. So we got to use our head, right? We got to come up with an alternative to correcting the balance of the fishery. So I knew enough about gizzard shad from school. Like I said, they probably had released that pheromone. They were all like 18 to 20-inch gizzard shad. It was obviously they tied up most of the biomass in the lake. So I made the assumption that most of the shad were older because I saw no young shad anywhere. I saw nothing. Everything was like that. So I went ahead and made the assumption that pheromone was in the water and the reproduction had shut down. So I thought, well, I've got plenty of bass that I can add. They're not going to be big enough to eat the shad, but there was a pretty decent population of like green sunfish and stunted crappie in there. I thought maybe if I could get the bass population just a little bit higher and get a few guys around the lake putting in feed to feed the bluegill. That's the one thing you can do. You can feed bluegill will take feed, but crappie and green sunfish won't. So you can kind of artificially kick the pond towards a little better bluegill population with the feed. So that's what we did. I had a couple guys who were into fishing. One actually bought an automatic feeder that went off every day. The other guy came down and fed as much as he could. Had a few other people who randomly fed, but we had a couple guys real consistent daily and willing to do that. So that helped a lot, I think. I brought in about it was 40-acre lake, so I believe it ended up being around 8 bass per acre that were from other places stunted. So what, like 300? And I think I ended up started like I think I put 300. So it might more like 7 bass per acre. I got a hold of 300 pretty quick out of another place and put them in there. So the line of thinking that I had was if all the gizzard shad are older, they'll live a lifespan and die. It's probably about 7-8 years. So I was assuming there was a decent population of older gizzard shad that would just naturally die. And if I had some bass population there in, kind of artificially, I stocked them. Maybe when the next shad spawn went off, those bass would keep keep the cycle from happening again, because it's usually what happens is it's called a boom bust system, where the shad stun it and then they die and then they spawn again and then they stun it again. So it's like a cycle that happens, and bluegill will do it. Any forage fish will do it if you don't have a sufficient enough bass population. Well, it worked. I got couple years after that, probably 5 years into the thing, and the bluegill are taking feed nicely. We got a better bluegill population than we've ever had. We were seeing diversity of size in the gizzard shad population, and that crappie fishing actually picked up a little bit too. They didn't look good, but they didn't look like skeletons like they did before. So that stocking job did pretty good. But the one thing that I did do was I took an old hole punch. Like, you remember in kindergarten, those little metal have like a little makes a punches a hole like that, like pliers, and it punches a hole. I tagged all the bass. I punched their caudal fins, and the hole will stay there for, I don't know, this summer. It might stay a hole, but the fin will grow back over. But it'll leave like a little. You can see it like a little round, and it'll have like waves in there. It almost looks like the AT&T logo, a little wavy action in a hole. And it takes a couple years for that to grow out. So that was the way that I tagged my bass, to know that those are some of the ones that I stocked. And that worked pretty good too, for a couple years until their tails grew out. But the funny thing is that was the first time I'd ever transported that many largemouth, into an area. And then even after the fish, like the forage base rebounded, and there was plenty of smaller gizzard shad, plenty of smaller bluegill, plenty of smaller crappie too. Some of the bass were healthy, not quite 100% relative weight, but still like way better than they were. But some of those, probably like 50% of the original bass that I transported in, didn't even grow. Like, they stayed skinny, they stayed stunted looking, they stayed poor looking. They did not. And there's some of the fish. So you really, like, you would have like one 14-inch fish would be like, 90, 92% relative weight. And then another tag fish would be like 75% relative, nowhere close, like the fish, and it's stalled out. And my theory on that is those stunted fish had been stunted for so long, they were just older and just not capable anymore, like anybody older, and they stayed alive and they lived their lives. But that, like, actually fished pretty good for the next, let's see, I had that place for about 14 years. So that would have been about year 5. Yeah, years like 6, 7, 8, maybe almost not quite 10 years, probably like 8 years. But then actually the Corps did drain that lake to fix the dam. And then once they did that, that place became an absolute gangster of a lake. But that's just one example of relocating bass, and the bass that you put in there, even though there's abundance of forage, don't grow. And again, the completely misinformed guys who think they can just take fish and throw them anywhere. Oh, that fish is just going to grow over there. I see them on Instagram all the time, relocating 9-pound, 8-pound bass over to their ponds, over their lakes. That fish is 99 times out of 100, that fish is going to lose weight. You'll be lucky if you ever even see it again. That's another thing. Like, you don't hardly see those fish that you stock ever again. But you took it out of an environment where it was capable of growing to 9 pounds, and you put it into an environment because there's no 9-pounders in there. You'd be fishing in there, wouldn't you? So they think by putting a 9-pounder from here to there, it's going to make it better. And it doesn't. It makes it worse. And I don't know, it's only been about 30 years of me talking about this stuff, and it doesn't, you guys listen. How many we got? We got 6 people listening, and I thoroughly appreciate every single one of you. But for the massive mess of a problem that we have in this country of non-listeners, we need a lot more than 6 folks to fix this problem, to actually listen. And it brings me back to the clown on Facebook. It's the same idiotic stuff every single time. Like, oh, well, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, exactly. Because the guys who are stocking the fish in the lake have they have a professional master's degree in it, right? So there's 6 years of college to learn about environments, right? And not only that, it's specialized. So, like, I studied ponds, right? And managed ponds and small lakes. If you manage rivers, you need to go take some different classes than me. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to manage Lake Lanier or 10,000 acre plus reservoirs. I don't do that. That's a completely different group of classes. That's punching above my weight, literally. I talk to these guys who do it in Florida, and it's like, aha, oh, I see, it's different, it's slightly different, but it's different. And it's like, if you guys don't know how a bass bluegill basic predator prey 2-species system works, but you're going to go online and talk like you know how 40 plus species, 10,000 acre reservoir works, it's just like talking to a spoiled kid. Give me a break. Frank. You count, Frank. Canadians count. I like Canadians. They're nicer than Americans usually. Americans usually have their heads up their tail ends, to tell you the truth. I know, Fishing MD. That's exactly right. He's saying that it's people think that the parts and regulation are just like randomly stocking fish with no idea about what they're doing, or not that they just did an electrofishing survey and did a couple weeks worth of work to determine that, oh, wow, we lost the bass population. Maybe we should, we got no bass reproduction this year for whatever reason. And maybe we should add some from one of our fish hatcheries and have those guys, help us out this season. Um, the disconnect is just, it's really sad. It's really a failure of our education system. Um, that's the best way to put it. It's just like, I don't care how many days you go fishing. I don't care how many bass tournaments you win. You're never going to put your boat on the trailer at the boat ramp and some guy with a PhD walk over and hand you a master's degree in fisheries and say, "Congratulations, you're now a fisheries biologist." It's not how that works. Not even close. I worked my butt off at that school, barely got through it, and it's like for nothing. You can't get hardly anybody to listen. Like, even working in the field 20, 30 years. Television is a powerful brainwashing tool, boys. It's really scary when you sit back and look at it. It's just a complete misinformation. And the thing about it is, if everybody was informed properly, because that's everybody's misinformed the same way. It's always the same questions. It's always the same responses. It's always the same nonsense, right? So if they just learned it right the first time, we wouldn't be dealing with this nonsense, man. I tell you what. Headwaters. I've heard a lot about headwaters. The smaller fish look stunted to me. They've got it's. I think I'm pretty sure it's catch and release only. And again, everybody's going to point their finger at the DNR guys. Oh, Florida FWC's a bunch of idiots. Yeah, well, they don't make the laws. Okay, politicians make the laws. So the problem is the general public is a bunch of idiots. That's electing a bunch of idiots. That's creating all this idiocy. Idiocracy became a documentary. I don't get it. I just try to come on here and help. Oh, I know where you're going with that, Frank. I forgot about that dude. I love Frank. Frank's my comic relief. What was that guy's name? Pete. Jeez, oh Pete. Yeah. Perfect example though. You want to take a reservoir in South Florida and apply the management of that to a 2.5 acre pond in northeast Georgia. It's like they're not even remotely close to the same thing. Fishing MD says, Mike. Good to see you, Mike. Yeah, fishing says he's got the Texas guys have put out. Now that's the funny thing, and that's one thing. Hopefully, we get Jason on here. I mean, he's not coming on Mother's Day, obviously. A bunch of you 8 degenerates that are on here not paying attention to your wives and mothers. But Texas Parks and Wildlife gets a ton of respect for the where is it, Lunker program. So, okay, what have they done? Well, they're continuously catching and basically manipulating Florida bass genes to be stocked to get offspring off the biggest fish to be stocked. And I don't know exactly how this works. Okay, I'm just kind of it's my limited knowledge, but they have a significant, artificial breeding program to help genetically put the fish in places where the fish can actually grow and put the best genetically available fish in those places. And everybody pats them on the back and tells them what a great job they're doing. Florida doesn't have to do that. They already have Florida bass here, right? Not that they're not breeding them. We just went down there and saw. They're certainly helping them. They're tracking where they're getting northern bass, infiltrations, and they're making sure they're Florida genes. And it's illegal to stock a northern fish anywhere here. You can't bring northern fish into Florida, as you shouldn't. What we did in Georgia and what's available in Florida are two completely different things. Again, that seems like common sense to me, but common sense ain't so freaking common, boys. Anyway, the Florida guys, I have never seen, like, everybody around here, like, okay, the eelgrass got knocked out by hurricanes, and I'm talking about, like, I'll do a video of the eelgrass because it's everywhere in Rodman. It's coming back like a gangster in Rodman. I don't know if you guys saw that manatee that was swimming around my boat this morning, but I'm fishing around the eelgrass because it concentrates fish. Find the eelgrass near the ledges, and I've been picking up fish around it. Now, eelgrass is a terrible, nasty monster to have to fish around with treble hooks, like speed worms, anything single hook comes through it better. But it's like fishing around pieces of tape in the water, literally like Scotch tape. It doesn't come off the hooks. We have to physically remove it. You can't shake it or pull it through. Once you get it snagged on the lure, it's snagged on the lure. You got to reel it up, pull it off, clean it off and fire it again. And the manatees like root it and pull it and chew it. So there's just pieces of it floating in the water all over the place. So it is a little bit of a hassle to fish around, but it concentrates the fish. So like last year, the eelgrass started popping back up. This year, the eelgrass is really doing well. And I think that there's probably more manatees in the lake right now because of that. I think they really like to eat it. So I guess they can smell it probably or something. I don't know. But there's more manatees out here than I've ever seen. And I think that has to do with the habitat, the eelgrass. But I can't tell you if I've heard one misinformed guy down here, I've heard 1,000 of them talking about the FWC sprayed all the eelgrass out, and then now the fish is bad, the bunch of idiots. And I thought to myself, like, the St. Johns River is 300 miles long. You think you could spray enough 2,4-D off in that eelgrass to kill it all? You don't know very much about spraying stuff. Like, that's not even freaking possible. Like, they don't have you would literally need the army to go out there every day. Come to find out, after talking to the FWC guys I made friends with, there's no spraying program for hydrilla in Rodman Reservoir at all. And I've heard that too. Oh, well, they sprayed and killed all the hydrilla out. No, they didn't. Not one drop of freaking chemicals have gone in here to treat the hydrilla. And not only that, I've also heard multiple times, oh, I've seen those guys. They just sitting there, they're just pumping that stuff off into the water, just dumping it into the waters. They're not doing their job right. Oh, really? Because you know how to spray. Come to find out, every single treatment boat is not only outrigged with GPS, but it's also outrigged with a flow meter. So they can tell exactly where the boat is and exactly how much product is going into the water from a desk someplace else, from on a computer. So not only do you got the guys who are experts in doing the treatments, who usually don't even work for the state. There's usually sub and contracting guys like me. I sprayed all kinds of public water. So don't think it's the DNR or whatever spraying it. It's guys like me spraying it. They sub it. I don't know if Florida does, but a lot of states do. Anyway, we did not have GPS in the boat, and we did not have flow meters that that reported back to a computer that we were doing our job properly. It was up to us to do our job properly. So I was amazed by that technology. That's something new on me. But again, it's just like, man, if you just took 5 minutes and talked, or even took 5 minutes and typed it into Google before you go online and start typing a bunch of nonsense, it sure would make our fisheries a lot more healthy, because we're just spinning our tires having these stupid conversations over and over and over again. You can't advance when you're spinning your tires. Spinning ain't winning, as they say in drag racing. Let me check the comments. I probably missed a bunch of stuff. Probably a bunch of good stuff too. Scroll, you stupid thing. Oh, there we go. Oh, Mike says don't feed the trolls. Actually, Mike, I've got a pretty smart way of using those guys. So I actually do feed them. I engage them. If you notice, I engage them every single time, because they're usually last word freaks. So they think they've won the argument just because they've typed the last thing into the thread. Like, they don't really understand how hard they're getting owned, which is funny for the intelligent people that read through the thread. But then also you got to consider, okay, so what usually ends up happening is they make a statement, and it's the same statement that I've answered the question a million times. So it's no problem for me to respond to it quickly. I respond to it quickly, and then they're going to write a book of word salad back. Like, because they wrote a lot of stuff, that means that they're smarter than me. It doesn't matter if any of it makes any sense. So then I'll respond back to that. And I usually don't read the entire post of word salad. I usually just read to the first thing that sounds dumb, and then I respond to that first thing. And then another book of word salad comes back. Usually the name calling starts about right then. And then that's when I'll tell them what I'm doing to them. Every letter you type pays me and drives the algorithm to people who will actually listen. So That's why I engage them, and that's why I'm not. They don't. They're not like they're very frustrating people to deal with. But I generally don't usually like have any kind of emotions about it either way because I know I'm playing chess and they're playing checkers. Let's be honest. Um, and the funny part about it is once you give it to them in that perspective, I've only had 4 years of doing it. I've only had one guy come back and respond after they figured out that they're actually helping me a lot. Um, it's kind of funny. So actually, I call it making stupid work for you. I told that to JT at Yak Gadget. We were fishing together at Shelley Palooza thing, and he busted out laughing and said, "We're going to make T-shirts. We're going to do a aquatic biologist Yak Gadget mashup." Which, by the way, shout out to JT and Yak Gadget. If you guys need kayak accessories, check him out. His stuff is a lot cheaper, and it's really good. Ooh, there goes a palmetto bug. It's time to spray the house again. You hate the stupid things. I use Bifen, Bifen. You can order it. You can order it on my Amazon influencer site. You can pick it up most places, and it's pretty safe to use around your house, around your pets. It'll kill mosquitoes. It'll kill roaches, and definitely kill his big butt. I'm gonna have to go on a hunt. I'm not gonna be able to sleep with his. Have you seen palmetto bugs? They're like roaches this big down here, but the bifin will last about 25 to 28 days outside, depending on how much it rains, and it'll last up to 90 days in the corners, under the baseboards, inside your house. They use it in hotels and stuff. You don't want to get it on you, but just wear gloves and put it in a pump up sprayer and spritz it around a little bit, and it kills pretty much everything with an exoskeleton. You can get rid of the. Ooh, there he goes again. I'm gonna kill him. Out of you, I don't have a shoe. You just wait. It's going to be chemical warfare on your butt, buddy. Anyway, Bifen. Bifen, if you fog it, we used to wear a mask and fishing shirts and fog it around people's swimming pools. And it's what those guys use to keep the mosquitoes away. It's one of the products that they use anyway. You fog it up and around all around the pool area and stuff, and it'll keep mosquitoes away pretty good when it's distributed in a fog. If they land anywhere, like the mosquitoes, if they don't land, they can fly in and get on you. But if they land on anything that's been fogged, they die. And like I said, it's got a residual. It's 25 days, so um, I use it and have for a long, long time. I've just had some experience doing it. I work for a pool company, and we treated that kind of stuff as well. But gypsy moths, do we get gypsy moths? That's a good question. I haven't seen one. Probably. I can't imagine that we don't have everything on Earth plus some things, 40 or 50 things that haven't been identified. Like this morning, I have to break because there's 8 or 10 Osceola turkeys in the road going down to the lake. I get down to the lake and get put in, and of course, I don't have a paddle. Got to drive back up to the house. So I drive back up to the house, and there's a crow, like it looks like Star Wars when they're flying through the trees. There's a crow chasing a bald eagle, and he's flying all over the freaking place trying to get away from the crow. Crow's pissed at him. Get my paddle, get back down there, paddle out. I'm messing around with the trolling motor, and like this little baby alligator swims right, like checking me out, like the manatee did, just right past the kayak, and then kind of drifted around me for a while. I took a picture of him. He just kind of hung out around me, and then the manatee showed up, and the gator left. So I don't know if the size of the manatee kind of spooked him or something, because he was a little bitty gator. He wasn't big. I wasn't really worried about the small gator. I was worried about what nest he came out of, because we have got some gators. We got Godzilla down there, man. We got some that are about as long. I've seen some as long as my 11-foot kayak. It looked it anyway, and that's when I get out. I like the bigger kayak. honestly. That 360 kayak's money, and I like fishing out of it. It's very comfortable to fish out of. It's a little bit. I wish it had a foot controlled trolling motor. I'm using that tiller handle, and it's a little awkward, kind of using the tiller handle. But I don't want a real expensive trolling motor using that lake. There's so many stumps. If I bust that 150 or $200 one that I've had forever anyway, no big deal. I'll go get another one. But man, those foot controls are not cheap. So I don't know. It'd be a little bit easier to run that yak on a foot control though. Through the 11-inch. Ooh, let me grab that real quick. I'll show you. All right. Back. So, all right, this is what happened. The Elite Series came to Palaca, which is about 15 miles from here. And one moment. Okay. So while those guys were here, yes, sir, that is a unit of a bait. And I hit it right there on the trolling motor. You can see the mark. I whacked the paint off. That's okay because Jen can repaint it for me. But this is the one that she did the video on where she touched up the back. And I didn't want it to be like super jet black all the way down to here. I like the lavender a lot. Lavender's always been good. But I wanted that black back, a little darker to match the hatch. So this is the 11-inch trick shad. And while the Elite Series was here, this year you can see down in the water a little bit better. And the gizzard shad are freaking ridiculously big in here, kind of like the ones I was just describing earlier, like 18 inches long. So this isn't even this is only 11, this isn't even a very good mimic. Ouch, the hooks are sharp. But as you can see, I mean, there's my hand. It is a freaking tank of a lure. So I had to get a dedicated rod for it. And I found, let me see this. Let's see if I can do this. Lexa, it's a Daiwa. And this reel I found it about a year ago at Dick's. And it was in the like the 40% off bin, in the fishing bin for sale. And I was like, oh, I've never even seen this reel before, right? A power handle on it and everything. And I'm like, I'm getting that for 30 or 40% off or whatever it was. I think it gave like $100 plus taxes or something like that, maybe $130 total. So I grabbed it. And I've got, for a lure like that, this is 100-pound braid because I don't want to snap it off. It weighs half a pound. The lure literally weighs 8 ounces. So I'm kind of maxing out the rod. That's Mike's biggest. It's the Bull Shad Dobbins mashup. He's got his own swim bait rods. And dude, for the money, you can't beat these Bull Shad rods. I promise you. They're really good rods. I like Dobbins sticks anyway. But let me see what it's rated up to. Yeah, it's rated to 8 ounces. And I think Mike said it was like a 7-ounce bait, maybe. I can't remember exactly. We talked a long time. Anyway, that's the rig that I'm running, and it's 8'3" stick. So it's basically saltwater rod, but it's got a nice moderate break to it for the treble hook. It still has some flex. It's a fast action, but it's got good flex. It's really the perfect rod, and it loads up. And once you figure out, it's almost like casting a underhand softball kind of. I use 2 hands. The handle's terribly long. You can see that. So I'll 2-hand it. And I'll use this hand to get leverage and load the rod. And you can bomb it pretty good. And then the thing I like about the Daiwa reel is it's got this micro adjust to the magnets where the Shimano Tranx does not. You just have that one single. And the Tranx, it's got like a bigger power handle, It's like this much bigger, and I don't like it. Like this one is more low profile and not awkward to reel. Like it, I like this. I like this one better than the Tranks. If you're shopping for big heavy duty reels, this one is easier to cast all day long, or because I can't anyway. I'm getting old. It's work casting a bait this big. I switch. I'll throw it around an area, for a few minutes, and then switch lures and go to a lighter rod and work the same area with lighter, smaller tackle. So I'm kind of just switching between rods like that every place I stop. But I always go in with the big lure first, and then go to the small. I'm just trying to trigger that big fish, to chew. And I don't know. I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just the pattern that I use. But yeah, this trick shad, and I burn it too, man. Burn the crap out of it. And it's like a half turn. Bat, 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 bat. You kind of just add a little pause and get it. I'm just mimicking the way Mike fishes. I've seen Mike fish. I've fished with him before. And I mean, he rolls it. So you let it hit the water and you don't let it sink too far. You've got to let it sink a little bit unless you want to wake it, but it'll wake really well. But if you just let it sink for a second, Mike says, like, if this is the water column, right? That upper part of the water column, the bait is trapped up there. It would be no different than having it down on the bottom. It's trapped down there as well. Baits in the middle of the water column aren't trapped, right? They can get up, they can get away in any direction. But if they're down here swimming or they're up here swimming, they're in a trap position. So Mike has designed the baits to be burned, and he's designed them that you let them hunt up here in the shallow, right? Like you're not fishing them deep, and you don't have to worry about it, because on a big bait, like when they fire off on a big bait like that, I've seen them come from 20 feet deep on smaller than that glide baits, right? When you trigger them, and you ain't stopping them from getting to it. If they're following it and looking at it, you're probably not going to hook it. The best thing you could do is not slow down, is speed it up to try to invoke a reaction strike out of them. Don't play that slow down and let them look at it even better. If they're following it and looking at it, they already know something's wrong, because they'd have lit it up otherwise. But after watching, and well, actually, I watched a dude out here by the house, and I don't know which pro it was, but I don't know what glide bait he was throwing, but he was throwing a big glide, and he caught a nice fish on it. So as soon as I saw all those big gizzard shad and saw that dude land, it's probably a 7-pounder. Yeah, I said the next time I'm going to Atlanta, I'm going to go talk to my man Mike. We're going to get a good gizzard shad mimic. Mike says that's bigger than the last bass that he caught. Yeah, me too, actually. What's up, Big Malone? Yes, of course I chose it because it's Georgia colors, and because Mike gives me a sweet discount. Shout out to Mike Buka. He's my dude. Love Mike. Yeah, but I promise you, you can't. I don't even know what the retail price is, but it's worth, like, some of these rods are stupid amounts of money, and his isn't. A couple $100, I think. It's not going to break you. And now, I got a dedicated. I can take that thing to the coast too, redfish with it or whatever. But I don't know. I like fishing the glide baits. I like burning them like that. And what you do is you get, like I said, you get that cadence, and the head just kind of, I don't know. It's real quick. It's just boom, 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 like that, and then you pause it, and it'll glide out. And for some reason, mine usually glides out to my right. I don't know if it's how I'm working it or how I'm holding the rod. But then if you pop it and pause it one more time, you can get it to glide back to the left. So I'm actually been able to figure out how to make it glide around things. Like, you get it going, and like you come past the stump and then pause it and snap it, and it'll come past the stump like that. Like this, if the mic is the stump, I can get it to come past it and pause, and then come back past it one time like that. So that's pretty cool. You can kind of direct it, and all his glide baits will work that way too. By the way, not just the big ones. There, I've got a smaller one. It's in the other room. Um, they'll smoke that thing out here pretty good. I think it's like a 6, might be the 7. I don't know, but it's considerably smaller than that. Easier, much easier um, to deal with. Not nearly as tiring. So my strategy for Rodman is going to be probably big glide, small glide, jerk bait, plastic. Those four rods right there. And by plastic, I usually mean speed worm. Um, I can't get them to eat the bellows very much, although I did get one massive strike on the bellows. I kind of took Rick Clunn's advice that he gave me on burning his blades to the pads, and I did the same thing with the bellows gill. I threw it up in the pads and was just bringing it back and pausing, just real pause in the hole, let it fall in the hole, then bring it back up to the surface and let it come through the pads again. It's just another way to try to invoke a reaction strike, and that's exactly what I got. And I don't know how the fish got off because it freaking smoked. That bellows gill is a good fish too, and but it shook it. It just came up and shook it. I think it's just maybe the braid combined with a stiff rod, gave it some leverage against the hook or something. But I've noticed that you'll get more bites on Florida bass with speed, not with slowing it down. For me personally, anyway, they seem to be more reaction strikers than anything. Jerk baits are very successful. Don't think about coming to Florida without one. The 110 or the Berkeley Stunner works pretty good. Mega Bass 110s, the 110 juniors or the upsize one. I've had pretty good success. Sometimes I'm switching sizes around. Like some days a little smaller one works, some days a little bigger one works. I've noticed too on my jerk baits, I'll give it like the horizontal snaps. I'll reel it down, and give it like 3 horizontal snaps to a pause, and then vertical snaps. And it really gives it like a zero spook type of, it really causes it to swing left and right dramatically on the verticals like that. And I'll go back, change the cadence back to horizontal, back to vertical, and I'll kind of just even like a 45 too. Like I'll just mess with the way that I'm working the jerk bait back. And some days it works better on the horizontal, some day it works better on the vertical, whatever. But it seems like every day it's when I'm putting more speed to it, not slowing it down. I let that pause hang there for a good while, but when you engage it again, like I'm fishing like my jig reel on 8.5 to 1 gears on the jerkbait rod to be able to recover line because I'm working it so fast. But I've noticed the faster I've moved the bait, the more bites I've been getting. Yeah, I would imagine those muskie would light those gizzard shad up pretty good, dude. Sure would. I could definitely see that being. I bet these larger baits would work really good in Canada too, man, because I bet they don't see that very much. I know they don't see them very much out here, and that's exactly why I'm doing it. I can't tell you the number of guys, even with the smaller glide bait, they're like, "What are you fishing for? Sharks?" And I'm like, no, bass eat fish like that. It's like a 4 pound bass could eat that easy. He's choking that. So, oh, one cool thing that happened, I pulled back up. I went fishing all morning. I'm pulling back up to the ramp about lunch. There's a dude lives up the street on his bucket down there. They're having Mother's Day fishing. His wife's down the bank there, and he's on the bank. And right as I'm pulling up to the ramp, I look over and man, it was a nice bass. It was a tank, probably I don't know, 6 to 8 pounder. It was a big old football. And I went, "Hey, there's a bass right there." And as I'm putting the kayak on the back of the truck, dude, he's fishing night crawlers, cast over there and hooked it. He didn't get it in though. It shook on him too, but he was laughing. I was laughing. It was a good time. Yeah, I hear you on that one, Frank. Um, I was working a like a top water. What's that thing called? Oh, the Chapo. I didn't get any bites on it though, but I'm not sure what's going on back there. They did it last spring too. I showed a video. I'll take more videos of it. I don't know if it's thread fins or if it's pogies, which is kind of a different species of herring coming in from the coast. But that's one thing that makes this fishery is impacted by coastal migrations of bait fish, right? There's mullet in there. There's thread fins. I've seen people cast netting thread fins, and I'm not sure if what I'm seeing is thread fin spawning because they're awfully big, but thread fins can get pretty big too. I'm used to them in ponds; they don't get that big. They'll be like that, but in bigger reservoirs, thread fins can, I think, 6 or 7 inches is decent thread fins in bigger water. I don't know if I'm looking at thread fins or pogies, but there's definitely like massive amounts of shad out there right now, shad like bait fish out there, and they're definitely the bass are on that. So I was throwing the Chapo over the tops of those schools of fish because you can see them at the surface. I wasn't successful with it this morning. And again, the stupid eelgrass gets in the Chapo like ridiculously. So I don't know. Might have to go to like a single hook, a speed worm, or maybe like a trick worm. I know those dudes at the Elite Series were catching them on trick worms. What do I use to kill a Aztec? Yeah, good question. I think you just put that stuff in with some Zoom plastic and watch it all melt together. All right. I don't think I missed anybody's questions. No. If there's anybody new, there's 5 of us, so I doubt there's anybody new. But any questions you guys have, I'll try to help you with it about your ponds. I don't know if you saw that guy come in my thing. He's wanting me to post how to treat the pond and how to apply the chemical and how to do all that. And now there's a mosquito in here. I wonder if I left the door open. Probably be a damn black bear in here next. Saw one of them the other day. Haven't seen as many bears this year, but we got them. Holy cow, do we have them? Anyway, been running my mouth an hour. And I'm about out of information that I wanted to cover. I could go on about the trolls forever. Tyler's got one question in here. How do I tell what bass are feeding on water? Well, there's a couple ways that you can do it. I mean, you can keep a fish and clean it, cut its stomach open and look. Oh, which reminds me, my buddy Mickey was at Lake Lanier, right? And Mickey's old school. Like he comes from a South Georgia family in Thomasville, large family in Thomasville of farmers. So they played by the rules of if it hits the hook, it goes in the cooler. It is not going back in the pond with 6 or 7 sisters or whatever Mickey had. Yeah, no, they're feeding people. That's saving us groceries. And they also, ironically enough, had some of the biggest and best bass that you've ever seen in their ponds because they constantly harvested all the fish that they caught. And the ponds were big enough. They were 1 or 2 acre ponds. That like Nikki's mom, she was great. She's gone now, but she was a fantastic angler. She caught a 13-pound bass. Funny story. She caught that big old bass, and Mickey was in high school playing baseball, and I think he said he was pitching. Either pitching or playing short, and he looks over, and here comes his little mom's little S10 truck driving along the side of the field, which like you're not supposed to be driving right there, especially during the baseball game. But here she comes in her little navy blue S10, putzing up there, gets out by the third base, gets in the back of the truck, opens the cooler, and holds up a 13-pounder. Look at this one, boys. The ump called time, and everybody went over to look at the bass. Both cleared both the benches. I mean, nobody was playing baseball on that one. I love that story. But like I said, Mickey's old school, and he fishes at Lanier, and he gets after the striper pretty well. He's becoming a very good striper fisherman, and he'll keep them, eat them, and they're delicious. Like, I don't know if you guys have had any striper out of fresh water, but it's fantastic, firm, good meat. It's great. I highly prefer it. And Mickey cleaned one. I don't know. He's telling me about it 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago. I don't know, maybe a little longer than that ago. But he said the striper was absolutely packed full of crawdads, just nothing in its stomach but crawfish, which I found to be really, really interesting. Um, I just assumed they'd be out there chasing and feeding and would leave the bottom, the benthic stuff to something else. But, boy, was I wrong. Because it's not like Lake Lanier is not full of gizzard shad and blueback herring, which it is completely. And big open water, like 60, 80 feet deep everywhere. I think the thermocline in Lanier is like 45 feet deep. And you still get oxygen about that far underneath it too. In ponds, you won't get oxygen under the thermocline very deep. It's kind of the line where the oxygen stops in a pond. But in big lakes, it's different dynamics, and you get oxygen pretty deep, down to about 100 feet, I think, if I remember from 100 years ago correctly. But that's one way you can just keep a fish, cut it open, and look at what it's eating. There's also another way that you can do it. There's a tool that you can get, and it's basically just like a pump, makes them throw it up. You can kind of fill their stomachs up with water, and they'll puke up what was in there. And you don't have to kill them that way if you don't want to. And then the third way I can think of is a lot of times if you're on feeding bass and you just put them in a live well, they'll get stressed out and puke up the last thing they ate anyway. And that's another way you can tell without killing them if you're against that kind of thing or just don't want to. But the easiest way is just to cut it open and look at what it's been eating. Make sure I didn't miss anything. I just thought it was crazy though that a striper is just pounding the crawfish hatch, just smoking them. That's a good question, Frank. I said up in Canada, people don't harvest fish from warm water. They'll wait until the water's cold again because they say it's firmer and tastier. I don't think so, man. I don't know. I know one time, several times actually, I can think of like I've witnessed it once and I read it a few times. It was about duck hunting. It was about mallards, but there had been like a shad die off in the wintertime and the mallards got on to they're omnivores and they'll eat fish. And a couple, 2, 3 times I've heard guys say that around the shad die-offs when they shot the ducks and cooked them, that they just reeked of fish. Like you couldn't cook them inside, like you had, and then couldn't eat them either. The flavor was way off. So I don't know. That theory kind of holds water for me, man. Like there's definitely if you're eating a lot of fish, um, I think what they eat will definitely impact how they taste. I guess is the best way to put that. That seems reasonable. Yeah, no doubt. I don't want any bad sushi. Yeah. I don't know, man. I think so. Um, I mean, I've never really noticed it that much. I've noticed it like sometimes like in stained places. Some places the fish will have an off flavor. There's no doubt about that. But I think that has more to do with like the quality of the fishery, like the quality of the water, and of course what they're eating too. It could be the balance of the fishery. If they're just like those ducks, if they've shifted to something, it makes me wonder like, would the striper taste any different? I have to ask Mickey if he noticed a difference in flavor in the striper Philwa crawfish versus the rest of the time. But I have kept quite a few striper out of the lake, and I've never noticed that per se. Like I've never really noticed the ones that were harvested during the warm part of the year tasted any different than the ones that we caught in the wintertime. It's always pretty firm and pretty tasty. Like it's never been inconsistent meat for me, but I'm also not a like I'm not a guy who's eaten. I've ate so many fish for so long that I usually give them back. The dam down here where the public fishing piers are and stuff, or docks, I guess. Uh, I shoot the tilapia with my bow down there and take them and give them away to people all the time. And I've always done that because I had so many fish from electrofishing surveys that I just found places to give the fish to people. And you make really good friends that way too, people who are out there trying to feed their family, you know. Um, that's another thing I don't like about the shame language about people keeping bass is like, first of all, they're not hurting anything. Like you're completely misinformed uh, to think that harvesting a few bass especially from a lake of 10,000 acres, you're not going to catch enough bass to hurt that thing. That's just that again, your juvenile 12-year-old mentality of how this actually works is really showing. And then on top of it all, you want to shame other people. And again, those people maybe aren't as fortunate as you to have a glitter boat and to be able to fish in tournaments. Maybe they had a harder coming up and they need that as food for their family. And I think recognizing that idea and that, some of us aren't as lucky as others in how we're born and how we came up, and to have some empathy for other people's struggles. And you know what? Like I said, you make really good friends when you start giving them when they are down there fishing for their kids and are down there to try to, supplement their meals. And you're giving them free food like that, you make friends really, really quickly. And quite frankly, I have found that if collectively as a group, if you take now, I'm not saying you could definitely take one person out of one group and say one thing and another group of another group and say, bad, but just collectively as a group as a whole, if you had a group of men, doctors who could afford to pay me to manage their lakes, and a group of public fishermen down there fishing for their kids and trying, having taking a break from work and trying to catch some meat for their family to eat. 100% of the time, will have a better time hanging out with the public water fishermen than the PhD level doctors. All those doctors can go fly a kite. Their egos are too big. They make too much money. They don't learn. They can't. They're just as bad as the trolls. I've worked for them for years, and that's one of the reasons why you guys have seen me say it before. You can take your 1% money and leave my page. All right, there's plenty of guys who will take it. This is not the page for you. This is for the 99% of the other people in the world who work for a living, right? I don't want your rich boy money. Don't like you rich boys at all. Get off my page and go away. I am singling you out and treating you the way you treat others. For about you want to be a snob and treat people bad about the amount of money they make and think you're better. All right, take your better ass out of here. It's not the place for you. I'll be down here with the public water boys having a good time. I'd like to tip a cold one back with them, but I can't drink anymore because of health issues. You get the idea. I didn't set this up to cater to rich people to try to get their jobs anymore. Like I did that. I played that game with them. They don't listen. They're incapable of learning. The money clogs up their ears, and I don't like them as people usually. Like I said, not 100% of the time. Nothing's 100% in this world, But I'd say 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 of them, yeah, you just leave me alone. You're not a friend of mine, rich boy. I work for a living, and the people that I'm here to help work for a living. And this isn't for you. Go extort some blood money out of somebody else down at your job. Not this place, not for you. Don't care. Doesn't even make sense on social media. Why would you cater to the 1%? Why? It's 1%. I need followers, right? It makes a lot more sense to me to cater to the 95% or the 99% than the 1%. So, like I said, any of you guys, you want to go hire somebody, hire them. There's plenty of good biologists out there who do what I do, understand all this stuff. You can go get them. Frank, you don't have to win the lottery to come fishing with me, brother. Anytime you find yourself in this neck of the woods, we'll be down here. You got a spot on my boat anytime, my friend. And any of you guys do, for that matter. Hit me up if you find yourself in Florida. Actually, you know what I'm thinking about doing, boys? The Silver Spring State Park is 20 minute, 30-minute drive from here, and it's not far. And it's just crystal clear water, like vodka clear for like 5 miles. And they run like these kayaking, like float trips out there. They're not fishing trips. They're just tourists come and paddle. Excuse me. You know, dark socks, sandals down from Jersey or whatever. But the parking lot's full of them down there. And I had absolutely no idea how much money they're making to go on those little trips. Like you can do like an hour-long paddle, a 2-hour-long paddle, or you can drift the whole like 4 or 5 miles or whatever it is. That's like $400 to $600 they're getting to do the big drifts. You can take a group of like 10 people, you know, so you got to have kayaks, and it'd be a big group to make that kind of money. But still, like, I don't know. I might start doing a little ecotourism kind of thing down there and get a little cash flow going, because that looks like pretty easy money to me. You're in there at 8:30, like the park opens at 8, you're kicking off about 8:30, and those dudes are wrapping it up at latest around noon, and they're making $200-300 a day. I don't know, boys. I might be a kayak guide. And the cool part about it is the manatee season starts in the wintertime when it's not even hot out there. I might even just work for the not even work in the summer. Forget that. Maybe if you can make enough in the winter. I don't know. But I'm seriously considering it. I met the dude that owns Crescent Kayaks. I got that Shoaly. And I told him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'll hook you up. You know, like get him at a good price." And because the yaks they drift on in there are junk, man. They're that cheap, you know, crap that you can't sit in for more than 2 hours anyway. It's like I'd get some nice yaks, and I'd get some nice carbon fiber paddles. I'd be tricked out. So I don't know. It's an idea I'm thinking about. Yeah, it's vodka clear. No, Mike, it is not. Stephen Patrick comes on here from time. I don't know. Stephen might be in here. He might not be in here tonight, but he's not the same dude at all. That dude is out of Auburn, and I had a great conversation with him though, and learned a bunch talking to him about the shoal bass. Actually, he was without talking to him, I would not have landed the shoal bass that I did land. And it was a nice one, boys. It was like an 18-incher. Got him on the fly, on the 8-weight too. And I got to tell you, you know, everybody said like the shoal bass, you know, it lives in the shoals. It's powerful. You're talking about like a smallmouth type power, you know, maybe even a little stronger, they said, you know, and that's the only one I've ever caught. It's actually the only fish I've caught on that Lamson 8-weight so far. Well, no, actually, I caught a spotted bass on it before that. So I got a little dinky spot, but the first decent fish I caught on it was a shoal bass. And I tell you what, man, that 8-weight is a beast. Like that thing, he did not bully me at all. It was a pretty quick fight, and it went one way, and I'm like, you're not going left. I actually had to fabricate my own leader. I forgot to bring my leaders or couldn't find them. I thought I brought them, but I couldn't find them. So I had some 20-pound big game, and I built my own, like, I don't know, maybe like 8, 9 foot leader out of mono, out of 20-pound mono. But I had this sweet fly. It had a bright green flight, strike indicator on the back. It was a float, so you could see it no matter how far you cast it. It was a lead head though, and it caused it the combination of the mono and the lead and the strike indicator gave it just this really slow fall, and it was a nasty little fly. So I saw that shoalie kind of move out from behind a rock, and I put it ahead of it and let it fall down in there and then stripped it past the rock. And anything you put near them, they're real aggressive fish. You just got to present like something to them because they're actually nest guarding. Um, and I mean, the fish just picked it right up. But I tell you what, I mean, 18-inch fish, and they're telling me how powerful they are. Man, I bullied the hell out of that fish. It was no contest, no match at all. It was like an overwhelmingly powerful rod for it. It did not take me down the river, up the river. If it tried to go down the river, you're not going down the river. I just put the brakes on it and let that fly rod work him. And he's like, okay, I can't go that way. Go back the other way. Do the same thing, stripping a little bit of line, just straight muscled that fish in. It was pretty cool. But getting to watch it eat like that, and I just put it right back. It went right back to the rock. You know, you guys saw the release video. I caught it right there. I stopped on the rock and got up high, and that guy's talk though. I can't even remember his last name. Doctor, is it Stevens? I'm not sure. I can't remember his name at all. My memory's getting bad, boys. But anyway, I had a long conversation. We had a lot of colleagues, a lot of people we knew, similar, small world in fisheries, but he was instrumental. Like without without his input, I wouldn't have been able to catch that fish. And I think I probably have that same kind of impact on guys. I get a lot of comments that say, it makes me think about things different, when they talk to me. I hope so anyway. But yeah, listening to him talk about them, like the shoal bass are like, it's crazy. They live in the shoal. Like you just paddle through the slack water and get into the top of the shoal. I was on the top of the shoal where that fish where it had just started to get fast. And JT caught one kind of behind the shoal. I would say, I don't know, maybe a good 80 yards behind the shoal. The water was still moving pretty quick in there, but it wasn't like right in the shoal. But you on the shoal bass, you like if it's ponded area, like just paddle on by. You're not going to be catching shoalies in that super slack water. That's like a pond in the river. They're going to want to be in the current, in the fast water. That's how they got their name. And he told me, he's like, they'll be like right there. They'll be. You don't have to make long casts. You just have to work the area real good and get the lure to the right depth. And they'll take big baits too. They'll take glide baits and stuff. They're super aggressive fish. That was a beautiful river part of the Flint River too. I've never been in that part of Georgia, even though I've lived there my whole life. And man, it really reminded me of like a Western trout stream. It had a very similar feel. Fish very similar. We drifted 4 miles, just like you do out west, and went through, I don't know, 4 or 5 good sets of shoals. It was cool. Shout out to Drew for inviting me, man. Drew Gregory, check out he's going to Michigan next. I think they're going to have a tournament up there. They got 6 tournaments for the kayak adventure series this season. And then what'll be really cool, there's one in Kentucky, I think in Bowling Green at the last one. That's not too far from my dad's house in Rome, Georgia. So I think I might try to catch that last one too in Kentucky. And then next season they're going to start down here. I think they're going to have it on Rodman there, but I think you can fish anywhere you want, but it's going to be out of Ocala and they're going to use the Marion Theater. So if you guys come down, I'll definitely be at that one because I can fish right out here in it. Not that I can give you any advice on where to go catch big fish out there, but They were, Mike. They were sight fishing. They were like the kid that won it basically beat everybody up. I think he had like a torpedo or something. He was moving a little bit quicker and got there's a obviously like probably a a place that was holding fish a little bit better. He was a local guy, I think, but he ran in there and caught all the fish like within like I think he said a 30-minute or an hour long period. Like he had most of the fish, and they bit the first day. It was interesting the way they set the tournament up too. They fished like 4 hours on Friday and then all day Saturday. So it tied in nicely. They went to the talks and listened to is it Jensen? Yeah, Gene Jensen, the Fluke Master guy, did a talk, and then the shoal bass guy did a talk. They had I was fishing, but I'm just going off of what they told me. And then everybody went and had lunch, and then they had like 4 or 5 hours that day that was part of the tournament, and then they woke up the next day and you could fish all day the next day too, and that counted best five and length on the kayaks, no weights. But I don't know. It was cool. I did not fish in the tournament. I just kind of sport fished. Me and JT went in the morning both days and fished 3 or 4 hours. And then on a Saturday, I had to go set the booth up and go talk to the folks, and that was fun. David in St. Louis. I've been through St. Louis before, man. I haven't done much fishing up that way though. Oh, he's got a question. The pond he fishes dirty due to rain. That does happen. And do you think they spawned? Well, yeah, probably. And what you have to remember too is like somebody's texting me. A lot of fish will spawn in a couple week period, but there'll always be outliers. So I would say like 80%, maybe let's say 70%, probably 70% of the fish in the ponds that I managed would spawn in say a 2 week period if the weather was cool. But if the weather was not good, they can stretch that out. So I've seen that where the weather, like they'll start to spawn and then the weather get cool and they'll stop. And females can retain those eggs for 60 days. They'll stay viable. So the spawn will stop until the weather picks back up and then it'll start right back up again. But still, that's only for like probably like 70-75% of the fish. So you still got like, let's say 75. So you still got 25% of the fish that aren't going to spawn during that window. You'll have some early spawners. And if you think about it evolutionarily, it makes sense. Like if you're an early spawner, like genetically just kind of predisposition to spawn early, and your fry survive because of the weather, something happens later in the spring, then that patch of fish that grows up is going to have the genes, that early spawner gene. Same thing applies for the late spawners. I've seen bass on beds in March in ponds, like late March, early April, and then in the same pond, see bass in the same bed in June. Like some other male came up, used that area, and then months later, there's a late spawner in there doing its thing in June. So the spawn isn't like this, especially in ponds, isn't like this like window of opportunity that you only get for 2 weeks. They're spawning in there. And keep in mind too, boys, shallow is relative, right? I've seen bass beds in 16-acre ponds that are 12, 13 feet deep, right? It's the substrate that they like, not the shallowness of the water. Everybody thinks they're up there in 2 feet of water or up there with their backs out of the water. A few of them are, yeah. But I would argue that sometimes those are probably the more immature fish. I think a bulk of because you're going to have bird predator problems if you're in too shallow a water. You'll also see like reservoirs that will draw the water down sometimes, and their bass populations aren't hurt by the fact that the bass were pulled off the beds due to pulling the reservoir down. They just go make another bed in a little deeper water. It's not that big a deal. I see all these discussions on board. I mean, do you fish? You shouldn't be fishing bedding fish. Says who? Based on what? Like you guys aren't even keeping any of the fish anyway. So what difference does it make? Look, if you're disrupting the spawn by catching that fish, you're probably doing that lake a favor anyway with the amount of catch and releases going on. It's just like again, we're going back to my rant from earlier, a complete dang disconnect of what's really going on in the world. I If you've got a situation in a pond where you aren't getting recruitment, you're not getting bass recruitment, that has nothing to do with the harvest of the pond. That has to do, usually it has to do with crappie population, green sunfish population, some imbalance in the fishery where those bass are being consumed before they ever even reach 1 inch in length. Crappie will do that to you bad. Like you'll lose year class after year class after year class of bass to crappie in ponds. And it becomes evident. Like you don't like the bass fishing gets really terrible and the pond gets full of really skinny sunfish, crappie, bluegill, whatever. They all are poor because they're in a crowded condition. So they don't have much to eat. And there's no bass in there to control their numbers. And even when there is bass in there, I've noticed crappie like must be able to evade bass with their schooling, because I've seen ponds that are absolutely loaded with skinny, stunted crappie. And also, you would think, well, the bass that are there would be really healthy. They're not. They look terrible too. So I think the crappie are not the best forage for largemouth bass. I'm not saying largemouth bass can't catch them, can't eat them, but again, go back to the science. It clearly states and has for 75, 80 years now in every single county extension office in this country. It's widely distributed, and like not to mention you can't Google that stuff now. Don't stock crappie in ponds. It's not good for them. It's like gravity. If I let this sweet Rick Clunn 50th anniversary edition that I bought, let me get that in there. Don't even fish with it, just like keeping it because I got to meet Rick Clunn. But you know what? If I drop it, if I let this go, it's going to hit the table, right? Because gravity, it works every single time. And that's pretty much how crappie work in ponds too. Like every single time you put them in there, they're disrupting. Like I can look at the measurements of the bass and go, ooh, something's not right. These bass aren't growing right. It's probably got crappie in it. And it does, just like gravity. And again, I'll get the guys coming on. Yeah, but I caught an 8-pounder. Yeah, well, that 27-inch 8-pounder should have weighed 12.5. And then they get that look on their face. It's like, yeah, that fish is way skinny for the size that it is. And it's because of the crappie. And I don't know, same old song and dance, boys. I see. Yeah. You think you're catching the females left and right, but in the past 2 weeks it's died. Weather changes, any significant weather pattern changes, I would kind of maybe attribute it more to, again, you have to consider all of the variables, and we can account for like no known variables, right? But there's also unknown variables, like things that we're not thinking of. And there's things that I'm not thinking of, things that you're not thinking of. Um, there's a lot of variables that go into that. So I wouldn't want to pigeonhole myself in talking about the spawn. Generally, if you're catching those big females like that really hard, I would expect they're probably did their spawning coming off the bed and feeding hard to kind of, regain some energy, the spawn, especially the males, the males are the ones that've got to sit there and not eat at all. So if you're catching the males a lot, I would think your spawn might be over with. And then those males have been sitting on the bed for, a couple weeks, maybe even a month, depending on the weather. and they haven't been feeding. That's their job, is to sit there and guard. So if you're getting a high catch rate of males, you might be seeing, um, that, like they're coming off bed and they're feeding, trying to recover. And then when that is happening, try deeper water. Like a lot of times those big females will move off and find, like, try to find wood near the deepest water ledge. And after the spawn, that's usually where you will find, sorry, your bigger bass. And I also noticed too, like the elite guys, because we're post spawn here, none of them were hitting the banks. They were all out in the deep water, and there's a barge canal out there that they cut through the lake. Somebody thought it back in the 60s or whatever, thought it was a good idea to bring shipping containers through here, so they didn't have to sail the ships all the way around Florida. That's why Rodman Reservoir got built. So there's a barge canal that no barges go up and down. The lake was built, but then they discontinued the program. I think politics, it's politics, but the Rodman reservoirs remained. But there is a big shipping container ditch that they literally like raked out and just mounded up with the backhoes. You can tell it's like 12, 15 feet deep, depending on the lake. And then it has a humps like that. And then like my arms flatten out like this, right? So there's these big humps that come out of a ditch, humps up. And then on the back sides of those humps is where the timber starts, because they didn't clear the timber out of the lake. There's timber. And every one of those Elite Series pros was on the opposite side of that hump, out close to that deep water on the timber side. Rick Clunn ran out there. The kid who's I can't think of anybody's name. I don't even watch them that much, but the kid with the mullet from the Ugly Stick, he stayed in the same group. I've caught fish over there on glide baits where he was at. So I went down there. I couldn't believe the numbers of Elite Series pros that didn't fish the river, that came up into Rodman. And I mean, man, they were chine walking those big boats up in here, man. They were coming. And if it was one boat, I don't even know how many the field had in it on Friday when I was down there. I didn't count. I have to go pull the video, but it was at least 20 of them. They all came pouring in here. So I filmed them going by. And then I rode up and down the lake. Actually, I rode up and down the lake so much I ran out of gas. I had to go back on the trolling motor. I need to get a bigger fuel tank. Just waypoint markers and making notes on where all those dudes were fishing at. Yeah, David. See, you could see the water, but now you can't. So there's a change right there, right? A change in visibility. Remember too, in the stained water, go higher. The bass can't see as well either. Whatever distance you can see in the water, they can see in the water. But their sight's really not that important in stained water, because they have a lateral line system. And if you think about like a bat, a bat can't see very well, is practically blind, but they can catch mosquitoes out of the air, right? That's how sensitive a lateral line system is on a bass. They can literally feed. The bass don't need their eyes to feed on stuff. They can literally feel it and capture it based on the movement and the vibration. They can feel it. The best way I describe it to people is like going down to the beach, and the kids got the systems in their truck, boom, 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 and you can feel that as it comes by. Hey man, $10. Thank you very much, Dexter. I didn't even know that was a thing on here. That's awesome though, and I highly appreciate that. That must be part of the new monetization thing. Matt Robertson, yes, Michael, Matt Robertson. I got his spot mark. Sorry, Matt, I'm gonna spot burn the crap out of your spot over there, but it's not like everybody doesn't know where it's at. It's pretty easy to find. But I'm gonna get to Dexter's $10 donation question right after I finish this idea with David. So your lateral line system is it's so sensitive that the bass doesn't need its eyes. So go the other direction. Go to the rattle traps, go to the bladed jigs, go to the spinner baits, go to anything highly vibrational. I'll tend to steer away from soft plastic like Ned rig or plastic worm, Texas rig type presentations in stained water. I'll get away from that sensitive stuff usually. Not to say they won't bite it, but I'm usually like bladed jigs, spinner bait, cover in water, moving something, traps, like I said, anything that's throwing off vibration into the water when it's stained and you know they can't see it as well. And then I'll go the opposite too on the clear water stuff. Um, I'll I'll make longer casts in clear water because they can see me as good as I can, better than I can see them. They can definitely see up out of the water when there's no chop on it. If you have like glass water, they can easily see you in clear water. So make longer casts, and that's when I'll be changing up to like more subtle presentations too sometimes in clear water. I hope that helps. All right. Dexter's Lure Lab. I like that name, bro. That's good. How much more oxygen is in the water under low barometric pressure? That's actually a really good question. So, and thank you again for the $10. The barometric pressure won't change the oxygen levels, but the oxygen levels do change. So let's break down how the oxygen gets in the water. And then let's touch on barometric pressure because that also is important. All right. So the oxygen gets into the water through photosynthesis of the phytoplankton. So if you've ever seen like a pond that looks really green, but it doesn't have any plant. And I'm not talking about, plants you can physically touch, right? The water just has a green color to it, right? What you're looking at is highly fertile and just trillions and billions of plankton in the water. And that's the base of the food chain in the pond or the lake, is that plankton. And there's two general varieties of it. There's hundreds of species of zooplankton and phytoplankton, but just two general. Phytoplankton, it's a plant, an algae, and it takes in sunlight and it pulls carbon dioxide out of the water and it produces the oxygen that the fish breathe, most of it. You do get some transfer from like wind and wave action. But again, wind and wave action won't save your pond if the phytoplankton gets too dense. There's a balance there as well. Clear water has plankton, just not as much of it. So in super clear water, we would call that low productivity, meaning the clearer the water, the less amount of plankton, the lower numbers of pounds of fish per acre. Opposite is also true. The greener the water, the higher the chlorophyll, the higher the plankton density, the higher numbers of fish that water can hold. But just because it holds a higher number of pounds of fish per acre doesn't mean the fish will be bigger. That has to do with the fish population balance. So let's say we have a stunted bass population, like most of these ponds, right? And you want to go in and fertilize that water and become a plankton farmer. That's a technique we use in the Southeast. We can boost that system with phosphorus, with nitrogen. We can become a plankton farmer and we can get high productivity water. That won't make your bass any bigger. You're just going to have more skinny stunted bass per acre than you started with. So in that situation, what you have to do is pull the bass out, balance that system out so you've got some healthier, bigger bass, and then boost it. And then you'll have something that's really kicking along good. So what happens? Phytoplankton in the morning as the sun comes up, the light hits the water, and the phytoplankton take that sunlight and they take carbon dioxide out of the water and they produce oxygen. That's basic photosynthesis like any plant. All day long they do that, right? So as they're taking carbon dioxide out and producing oxygen, that's also changing the pH because carbon dioxide is acidic. So the chemistry there, like if you were to take a pH meter and read the water, it's going to be constantly changing all day long. And so like you might wake up in the morning, in Georgia anyway, that's where I'm out of, and you might see like 6 on your, or even 5.8 or something really acidic on your pH reading. Come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll be up at 9.5, gone to basic, right? It's because of the photosynthesis. It's changed. So that also means that at night, that phytoplankton respires. It breathes like we do. It's taking oxygen out of the water. It's not taking as much as it produced. So it's a net positive gain on oxygen. But you can't have a situation where if you over fertilize a pond, grow too much plankton, it can take all the oxygen out of the water at night and kill your fish. So again, there's a balance to this. We want to keep our visibility 18 to 24 inches of plankton visibility, and that's where you want, that's the sweet spot. Once the phytoplankton density gets lower than 12 inches, like 10-inch visibility, 8-inch visibility due to green plankton, all right, now you're running the risk of a fish kill. You've added too much fertilizer, or you're in a place like maybe a hog farm or something like that, it's putting in too much nutrients, and then that will kill your fish at night. No amount of aeration, if you've got like 6 inches of visibility, no amount of aeration, fountains, nothing's going to save you. I've seen it. Like, it's a myth. You've got to control that nutrient. You've got to get that plankton density down. It'll kill the fish. It's called BOD, biological oxygen demand. And it's a cycle. It works all day long like that. In the morning, right before the sun comes up, the oxygen levels will be at the lowest in the lake or pond. And then in the mid-afternoon, 3-4 o'clock, while the lake's still hitting it real good, that'll be at its highest. And then as the sun goes down and that plankton starts to revert, again, it creates this, what they call diurnal fluctuation or daily fluctuation of oxygen and pH. It's like a chemistry project. It all works together. Now, barometric pressure. Barometric pressure, you read the Farmer's Almanac and it tells you, the moon phase and the feeding times and all that stuff. Well, that's all kind of circumstantial. Like, scientists have tried for years, unless there's been some new research that's come out I haven't seen. The only thing that you can measure that actually changes a fish bite with an actual measurement, it wasn't moon phases, it wasn't any of that other stuff, was barometric pressure. And it's generally a falling barometer. The fish, statistically, you could prove the fish bit better on a falling barometer. So they did notice a change with a rising barometer as well, too. Like, just, you could get a measurable difference in the numbers of bites per hour on barometric pressure changes. So it's really important to pay attention to the barometer over the moon phase and over everything, feeding times or everything else. Science couldn't prove any of that other stuff, but barometric pressure, it could. So it's important to understand that. Now, the one thing that I've noticed here, it seems like I'm in Florida on these Florida bass, I'm getting more bites on more stable weather patterns. It seems like when the barometric pressure swings dramatically here, I feel like I'm getting bit less. I'm zeroing on those days. And on like the calm days, I get more bites. It seems opposite, kind of. But again, that's just me. That's just what I've done. That doesn't make it scientific, right? That's just what I've observed. So I would say that, you keep in the back of your mind, the barometric pressure changes scientifically. Yeah, they've proven that, but that doesn't mean that you can take that to the bank every single time. I've definitely had good days on, no barometer changes, but I would say a slight to pretty fast falling barometer shouldn't hurt you. That is exactly what I would be looking for in most places to expect the bite to change. Another thing to watch for, since we're on a bite change, on these especially on public reservoirs where they generate for power or they create unnatural flow, pay attention to that unnatural flow. Like, one of the lakes in Georgia, when I was in a bass club in college, is called Lake Oconee. And you would go pre-fish like on Friday. On Friday, they would open up the dam and they would turn the turbines for power. And as soon as they opened up the dam, because it wasn't a very big lake, I think it's like 9 or 10,000 acres, it would create flow. You could literally see the flow. It would begin to flow, and the fish would immediately turn on and bite. But on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, they didn't open up the dam. They didn't generate on the weekends because people used, high usage, public usage on the weekends. They wouldn't turn the generators on, and they wouldn't create that flow. And you would go out and skunk on those days where the flow wasn't, because you pre-fished on a day they pulled the flow and got all, you thought, man, you'd had a great day, great practice, gone out there and wore them out, catching nice fish. You go back that very next day and you zero, and you're like, what the heck happened? Well, it's the flow, unnatural um, dam type situation. So pay attention to that. If you're fishing any reservoirs that do that, you can call an information line and know when they're going to be turning it on and when they're going to be pulling the water out. And I know you can't at Lake Lanier. And I've noticed that at Lake Lanier. Like, I'll keep an eye on that. When are they opening up the dam? 2 o'clock. Okay, well, I'll be getting out there for 1 o'clock instead of getting up butt crack of dawn and getting out there. I'll be fishing around whenever they're pulling the water out, and usually having more success. Again, thank you, sir, for the donation, and I hope that helps. Plankton farming is a challenge. It is. I would recommend that you have a guy like me help you with that. It can be tricky. There's a lot of water chemistry involved with that, and you can circumvent that in ponds with feeding your bluegill. You're kind of skipping over the plankton part of it and just giving feed straight to the bluegill, which is making them bigger and heavier, which makes your bass bigger and heavier. And it's much easier and much more fun actually on ponds. When you're feeding daily in the same places, the bluegill will tend to congregate in those places at those times. That makes it more fun fishing for the kids. It makes it easier for the kids to catch the fish. Makes the fish grow, makes the bluegill grow faster. And since they're growing faster and bigger, the bass are growing faster and bigger. So the fertilization, I've seen guys, let's put it this way. If you don't fertilize correctly, it's way worse than not fertilizing at all. You cause drastic swings in the food chain. And by drastic, I mean in Georgia, you go from 100 pounds of fish per acre to 400 pounds of fish per acre if you fertilize correctly. If you fertilize incorrectly, you've boosted it times 4 and then snatched the rug out from underneath the fish. And that's not healthy for them at all. You're way better off just maintaining a good balanced fishery at the lower rate than doing it wrong. And just generally speaking, for the public who don't know how to do any of that stuff, it's easier. Just tell them, take a bucket of feed down there and throw it in every day when it's warm, when the water's above 65 or so. And you can feed them every day until the water drops below 65. They can stop in the wintertime. They don't grow in the winter. Their metabolism shuts down so much that it's not that fish don't eat in the wintertime, but they eat significantly less because their metabolism's so low due to the cooler temperatures. No, lights won't help. The plankton, it's just a natural cycle of how it works. If you could keep the sun up all day long, like in Alaska or someplace like that, where the sun's up for longer periods of time, that would do it. Also, too, in your lakes that freeze over or your ponds that freeze over and get a thick layer of ice, keep the light can penetrate the ice, and the plankton can still use the sunlight even though it's covered in ice. That's how the oxygen gets in the water under the ice, is through the photosynthesis of that plankton, even in the wintertime. But where you can have a fish kill in in the wintertime in your northern ponds is when they get a huge snowpack on top of the ice. That'll block the light. So that's how you get a winter kill due to oxygen depletion is when they gets a huge amount of snow on top of the ice that stops the light from penetrating the ice. If you keep the snow off the ice, blow it or melt it or I don't know, whatever it is y'all do up there, um, on your ponds anyway, that will. I've also seen those diffusers where they'll move the water, so that they'll create like a hole in the pond where there is no ice. That's perfect because you've got that small area that's not iced over, but the light can get through and the plankton can take advantage of that and put oxygen, in the water under the ice. Those LED, I've got an LED that I've been using at night, and that just attracts fish are just naturally attracted. That'll congregate your bait fish around that light, kind of like bugs around a light too. They'll naturally congregate around that. Low light conditions from cloud cover, absolutely, that can change the oxygen levels, Chrissy. That's a good point. Um, you can get fish kills that way and highly fertile. Like that's generally when you'll see it when it's really hot and then cloudy, and if you've got a thick phytoplankton, heavy phytoplankton density, and a cloudy day, that can kill your fish. The other thing that can kill your fish is if you have a super deep pond, because in ponds, again, your thermocline, like it's hard to explain. Let's see. If you have, say you have a 1 acre pond, it's going to get oxygen down to like 6 or 8 feet, depending on the water clarity and where it is. But you could take that same pond and dig it out, say 100 feet deep. It's still only going to have light penetration till about 6 or 8 feet. So it's that 90 feet underneath it of water is dead water in a 1 acre pond. It doesn't hold oxygen in the warm part of the year mostly. So if you get like let's just say that's that 6 feet of water right there where my hand is, right? So you've got this entire volume of water that has no oxygen in a pond, and this is the volume of water that does have oxygen. Well, if this volume of water gets cooled off by like a crazy thunderstorm that comes in and rains really hard and really cold, the only thing keeping these layers of water apart is temperature, right? So if this layer of water gets cooled off enough to mix with this layer of water, and this layer of water has a higher volume than this one, that will cause a turnover kill. And that's what's called a turnover. So if this layer of water with the oxygen cools off enough in the summer and mixes, it's mixing with water with no oxygen, and the DO plummets. And that's how you get a fish turnover kill in the summertime. Now in the fall, you got to remember this layer, as the water cools off gradually, it starts to get bigger and bigger slowly, and cooler water holds a higher amount of oxygen. So like you can go out in the wintertime and you can test the oxygen levels, and it'll be at like 13 parts per million, probably something like that. But go out to the same pond or same lake in the summertime and it'll be 6. And the difference is because physics, because warmer water holds less oxygen. So not only, like going back to our turnover scenario, not only in the warm part of the year, this upper warm water, when it's really, really warm, the hotter it gets, it shrinks that down. The heat will cause that. It's physically holding less oxygen because of the heat. It's shrinking the parts per million is what I'm trying to say. It's decreasing the amount of oxygen the water can hold due to temperature. So that's bad because there's less physically held oxygen, the density. As that water cools off in the fall, that number's going up. So instead of being at like 6 parts per million, it's at like 9 or 10 parts per million. And when the turnover occurs, there's actually more oxygen in that cooler water layer, and the fall turnover won't kill the fish like a summer turnover will. I think I explained that properly. Less barometric pressure is less oxygen in the water. That's interesting. Um, where'd you find that at, man? Just if you don't mind me asking. Because I'm trying to think of how the barometric pressure would change the oxygen levels that much. I mean, I wouldn't think it would change it enough. It certainly wouldn't. I don't think it would change it enough to affect the fish bite. Now, when you start talking about changing it like a turnover, oh, turnovers will shut the bite off. Like when even when because the fish are getting really oxygen stressed. Whenever you oxygen stress a fish, they will not bite. And whenever that, even if the turnover doesn't occur, if you got close to it, if it was really hot and then it really cools down and oxygen stresses the fish, I mean, the whole system shuts down. You will not, people call me all the time about that. Like, yeah, it rained and we got that front that came through and it changed the water temperature and it really oxygen stressed the hell out of them. And that will shut them down. Absolutely. So I wonder if that has to do, if I think we're saying the same thing, just in a different way. I'm just reading here real quick. I need my readers. Half these words I can't read. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know, man. If you put lights, I mean, if you had enough natural, I mean, if you had enough light, like it's like say like a grow house, you could get it to grow. But I just don't know how you would have enough of it to cover a pond to if the pond was small enough to affect for lights to affect it, it would also, in my opinion, probably be small enough that you could just mechanically aerate it too and keep oxygen in it like a koi pond. If you like a waterfall and a koi pond, that oxygen, it'll always be oxygenated as long as you keep the pump running because it's such a small volume. That's another thing people don't get. They put a fountain out into a pond and they're like, "Oh, it's oxygenating the water." Not really. It's not moving enough water. It's a huge volume of water to try to mechanically aerate. It's really hard to mechanically aerate a pond. It takes a significant amount. It's called a paddle wheel aerator. They'll hook it up to a PTO on a tractor, and it creates such a current that if you point it at the bank, you need to point it all the way across the pond. If you're too close with a paddle wheel and point it at the bank, it'll erode the bank away. It's splashing and creating such a current. To actually physically aerate the water, it takes a massive amount of effort, and most of these fountains are not. They're just blowing water up in the air. If you had a turnover or something that dropped the oxygen out, you might keep a few fish alive around a fountain, but it's not going to save bulk of the fish. And I know that from experience. I've seen them. I mean, when you have a fish kill, there's all due to oxygen depletion. There's nothing you can do about it. You're in the land. You're going to have to correct it, correct that system, like what caused the nutrient loading to cause the plankton bloom to create that. You're going to need to fix that. And if you can't fix that, and I've seen that, I worked for a surgeon, had a 3-acre pond on an old hog farm. Dude had liquid oxygen, 100% oxygen bubbling in. He had 3 aerators, 4 aerators. He had diffuser aerators, but because his dirt was so saturated with nutrients from 100 years of chicken farming or hog farming out there, or something was out there, but it was just pea soup green water. Every August when it got hot, his fish died. Every single year. There was no amount of aeration. Dude was a surgeon. He had plenty of money to try, but it was the dangest thing I've ever seen because he had every form of aeration, overabundant like use of it, like way more than what the book recommended, and it didn't matter. When the plankton respired at night, it pulled that oxygen right out too and killed his fish. No amount of aeration helped that dude. Yes, the nutrients were in the soil, Dexter. It was like I said, like it was in this dude's family for 80 years or whatever. It was a farm. It was a commercial. I think it was a chicken farm where they literally just pushed the chicken crap out. But I also seen it on a turkey farm. I've seen it on a hog farm. Um, when you get, and also too, one thing to think of, I used to get the HOA Karens hollering at me all the time for poisoning the water with algicides and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I'm not poisoning the water. And actually, I wouldn't have to do this at all if you would pick up your pet waste. Um, you would see a spike in phosphorus and bacteria after heavy rains coming into major lakes and reservoirs in Georgia and into ponds due to pet waste. That just runs directly off your yard and directly off into the water and fuels all kinds of algae and weed problems and bacteria problems because it's feces. Um, you see huge spikes in fecal coliform and stuff like that. I actually had one HOA test behind a guy's house. Fecal counts were high, made him dig up and redo his septic tank because of the water test that they pulled. And then they then hired me and I went out and looked, and the guy had his elderly mother living with him in this community, and part of her daily routine was to go out and feed the ducks and geese at the lake. And I'm like, you guys made this guy dig up and completely redo his septic system. And there's literally a trough of cracked corn that the waterfowl are coming up to every day and feeding. The high fecal count did not come from his septic tank. It came from the ass end of a goose, you fools. And that guy, you completely wasted his money making him do that, and using, you completely, misused water testing to make this poor man. And of course, I got fired from that job because the guy at the HOA who made him do that worked for the EPA. And his exact quote to me was, this is what I do for a living. And I said, yeah, it's what you do for a living behind water treatment plants for human wastewater treatment. This is what I do for a living in ponds. And you didn't run the fecal test that proves it was human fecal. You just did a basic fecal test, a cheap one, because the human fecal test is was back then it was like $5,000 to differentiate between goose coliform, human coliform. Like, you didn't even run the right coliform test to prove what you just said you proved. And I did get fired, but then I got rehired the next year because they let that guy go. So that was funny. But yeah. So the HOA Karens I'd always get with, have you been picking up your dog droppings? You've been following your pets around. That is a huge source of pollution in urban areas that people are unaware of. I don't even know what's going on in the thing now, man. We're getting memberships gifted to people. All right, man. I appreciate you, Dexter. I don't even know what this means, but that's awesome. That is totally awesome. I think that makes all you guys members of the page now. I'm very new to this monetization on YouTube, so I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. But thank you, Dexter, for everything you're doing there. I'm sure we'll all figure it out. All right, running over 2 hours now. Hell, I don't care. I'll stay out here all night. You guys want to keep paying me to do it. Any other questions I missed? Let me scroll back. Very kind of Dexter. If you need any help from me, my friend, you need anything posted, whatever you're doing over there at the Lure Lab, if you want to come on live and talk about what you got going, man, you're more than welcome to come on my channel anytime. and just DM me, follow me on Instagram, and that's the easiest place probably to get in touch with me. There's not really a very good direct messenger for this page that I've found yet, but anything you need from me, buddy, you got. Appreciate you, really do. Let me know what you got going on at the Lure Lab. I'll help you out any way I can. And that being said, boys, after 2 hours, my throat is sore. It's time for some green tea. I've taken up drinking green tea a lot. I hear it's good for you. And I'll be glad to roll, man. I'll make you a post, and I'll do you weekly posts for that matter. And definitely be in touch, Dexter. And I appreciate everything you've done here. That's awesome, man. All right, boys. Until next Sunday, hopefully we'll have the head of the FWC on, Jason Dotson, pretty soon, and we get to pick his brain about what's going on here at he runs the largemouth bass research, kind of like the Texas Share-a-Looker program, but he's doing it here in Florida, and Florida's making a big push on getting more information out on social media. So yeah, that's great, man. I'll help you guys any way you can, any way I can. That's awesome. This is really cool. I appreciate that. All right. Until next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you very much.